what do you make of this pitch? Two different energy agencies would still be able to fund renewables, but would also be able to do carbon capture and storage, so to create so-called lower emissions technology, not just zero. Is there any scope for Labor supporting this?
Well, firstly, Tom, I think it's not a coincidence that on a day when the government is expecting to get really bad unemployment figures, it is desperate to talk about absolutely everything other than the question of jobs. When it comes to carbon capture and storage, we support it. You know, we were the government that put in place the carbon capture storage flagship. It was actually this government which defunded that. Only a couple of months ago, we wrote to the government trying to get carbon capture and storage back on the agenda in terms of ways in which it could be funded. And there's lots of ways that could happen. Now, ARENA is focused on renewable energy, so, you know, we don't think that is the proper vehicle. But at the end of the day, you know, there are a million ways in which the funding can be put forward to get carbon capture and storage going, and we completely support that occurring.
So this is one of the ways. It might not be your ideal one, but you're opening the door here as long as there's still capacity, obviously, for these agencies to fund renewables, well, perhaps an all-encompassing... So, yeah, go.
Well, our point is that ARENA is about renewable energy, and that's what it should remain. But there's lots of other ways in which the government can put money into the question of carbon capture and storage, and we think it should. And indeed, a couple of months ago, we wrote to the government precisely asking it how it intended to get carbon capture and storage going again, pointing out ways in which that could occur. We've heard nothing from the government in respect of that. I think the government is putting up this particular measure here and focusing on ARENA, which is it's not so much the vehicle. It's the fact of whether or not you're going to pursue funding in relation to carbon capture and storage, which we think should happen. We don't think ARENA is the right vehicle, but
they need legislation to do this. If that's the path they're going to take, will Labor support the legislation or not?
Oh, well, this is on the government's part, an attempt to get up a faux debate about something which really is not at the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue here is whether or not they're going to put up money in relation to carbon capture and storage. It's not about what the rules of ARENA are. And so if they're going to focus this debate on the rules of ARENA, that says everything about how fair income they are in relation to carbon capture and storage. ARENA is for renewable energy. If the government is serious about it, let's look at these other vehicles where you wouldn't need the legislation in the same way and get the thing going. I mean, that's the obvious play.
But where does it actually go? That's your preference.
Well, from the government's point of view, I don't think it is about carbon capture and storage. I think it's about trying to have a fight about something. And to us, that's silly. You know, like at the end of the day, if you're serious about carbon capture and storage, there are many vehicles by which it can happen. You don't have to go to ARENA. ARENA is not for this. It is for renewable energy.
This is the path they're taking. So where does Labor sit on legislation right now? Are you uncommitted?
Well, I've made the point, and you know, if at the heart of the issue here is whether or not you want to see carbon capture and storage happen. We have been for that from day one. You know, right back to the Rudd-Gillard governments. They are the government which defunded the carbon capture and storage flagship. And instead, what they're now trying to do is get up an argument in relation to ARENA. And let's be clear. I mean, in the space of energy policies, you know, we've lost count as to how many this now represents on the government's part. This government is not about building a consensus in this country around energy and investment, which is actually what we need. It is about going out and having faux debates, faux fights, in order to avoid talking about other issues of the day. And there's a pretty big one happening today in terms of those unemployment numbers.
I'll get to them in a moment. Can I ask you one more in this area? 2030 emissions target. A leaked policy platform suggested perhaps through emission there wouldn't be one. Mark Butler's come out and said, no, there will be one. Where do you sit on this?
Oh, look, this is actually pretty simple as well. What Labor supports, certainly what I support, is this government's and this country's commitment to the Paris Accord. And I assume the government supports it as well. And it does a couple of things, Paris. One is it requires net zero emissions by 2050, and the other is that it requires there to be some medium-term target in terms of how you get there. So I support all of that. The problem that we've got at the moment is that the research which would underpin the development of a target is pretty old now. This government hasn't done any research for some time. So no one really is in a position right now to determine what a target should be. So how we address that dilemma, it's impossible really to answer that question now. But when we get to the election, we'll have a very clear position in relation to this, and what it will be is consistent with this country's obligations to the Paris Accord.
So just to clarify on that means a 2030 or 2035 specific target from the Labor Party?
Well, what it means is we've got to know what is the state of information available at that point in time, what can be determined at that point in time, what can't be, what work might need to be done in terms of putting the nation in a position to determine a target of that kind. The problem that we've got here is that the government has done no work in relation to the kind of research which would allow one to give a credible medium-term target consistent with what our obligations are under Paris.
But
that's the dilemma that we're now facing.
Time, you can sit one next time. You seem to be saying there might not be one depending on what's available.
Well, it's the last comment that you've just made. We don't know what's available, and there are a lot of variables in place here, and that's actually in the hands of the government. And so you can't meaningfully answer that.
But you could set one last time.
No, yeah, but last time was also 3 years ago, and research gets old, and that's the point here. And so, we need to really, the honest answer to the question is, all we can do is assess the state of knowledge as we are closer to the election, and make our position clear then, which obviously we will do, so that when Australians go to the polls the next time, there'll be no doubt about what our position is.
No doubt about it, but right now you're not saying one way or another whether
right now there's not. Right now, Tom, the fundamental problem is that this government has not done the work, the research, to enable a proper consideration of what the pit stop is, if you like, between here and 2050, as is required under the Paris Accord.
Right. We know they don't have a net zero by 2050.
No, but anyway, it's not just that, Tom. They've not done the research which would allow you to articulate what the pathway is. Now, in that circumstance, that puts everyone in a dilemma. And all we can do is work out what is the best state of knowledge in the lead up to the election. On the basis of that, give a very clear position, which we will do.
All right. And just finally, you mentioned jobs there. So the jobs figure coming out today, a big part of this slump is going to be Victoria. That's not the federal government's fault, is it?
Well, I don't know at what point Victoria stopped being part of Australia. The national economy. But that is the argument of the federal government. Literally, when you listen to Scott Morrison talk about everything in relation to COVID, the economy, you name it, it is as if it doesn't count when it comes to federal responsibility if it happened in Victoria. Aged care, federal government's responsible for aged care, but if it happens in Victoria, that doesn't count because that's Victoria. Jobs, if it happens in Victoria, it doesn't count. Victoria is part of Australia.
But aged care hasn't been the slump of the economy in Victoria. It's the outbreak which is traced back to the hotel quarantine. That's not up for debate, is it?
Well, what's really clear here is this, Tom. The federal government is responsible for the governing of Victoria in respect of a whole lot of areas, including, I might say, our national border, where the virus first came, and it is absolutely responsible in relation to a whole range of economic matters, including what relief measures are in place, such as JobKeeper and JobSeeker. For the federal government to kind of go out there today and say, in the light of what is going to be a very, very difficult employment number for the nation, that it's not our fault because it's all happening in Victoria, would be a complete abrogation of their responsibility. But it won't surprise me if that's exactly what they do, because they are essentially going out there and saying, if it happens in Victoria, it's got nothing to do with the Commonwealth Government. That is wrong. The Commonwealth Government is responsible for a whole range of governance in this state, because it turns out Victoria is part of Australia.
Richard Marles, Deputy Labor Leader, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.